So this will be a recording of More Adventures in Lightroom. It's the follow-up to last month's introduction to Lightroom, and we're going to discuss a number of things: how to create presets. We're also going to talk about what's the difference between a preset and a profile. We're going to talk about making collections, how Lightroom handles merging files into HDR and panoramics, exporting image files, black and white conversions, the use of plugins, and making a book. So the first thing we're going to start off by talking about is what is a preset. Basically, a preset is a series of instructions, a series of adjustments that you can make in Lightroom. So you can use presets both when you're importing images into your Lightroom catalog, as well as using presets in the develop module. What is a preset? A preset is basically a series of Lightroom adjustments that are saved. To initiate the series of adjustments, you just click on the preset. Adobe supplies you with some in Lightroom. You can easily make your own, and you can download from the various websites free ones, and then of course you can buy a bunch of them. So let's switch over to Lightroom and look at some presets. Now, I was taking pictures at Torah study on Saturday. I was in part to do some pictures for the new website, but also Rabbi Marta wanted me to take pictures of people celebrating Shabbat. Okay, so let's go to the develop module. And you can see over here there's a whole bunch of presets. Now, most of these are presets that come with it. I have downloaded some presets from other people, and I got some presets when I took a course on still life, and I'll just show you this. Now, what's interesting about presets is you can roll the mouse or hover the mouse, and you can see how things change. And you can sort of pick your preset to what you want, is your vision. Now, let me show you this one. These were these presets, and you can see how many there are. That are for still lifes, but you can use them for anything. And you can see how this is being changed. Now this is an interesting one because you look at the difference. What's happened here is it's been a little desaturated, and I think that there's a sort of a negative vignette on it also. You can actually, here's one that has a positive vignette. You can see that the area around the sides has been darkened. And if you go over here to the adjustment panel, you can actually see all the different things that have been done. Now, you can take a preset and then modify it. For example, suppose I wanted to put more of a vignette on this. I could lower this down, but all the other things that the preset has in it basically stay the same. Now, if I liked the way this looked and I said, I want to use this for another preset, I can go up here to the preset and click the plus button, create preset, and I'm going to call this BAM test. And basically what it does is you can select all these different things, or just a few of them, and it will create this and put it in what's called the user presets. So I'm going to create this. All right. Now we'll look down here under user presets, and you'll see BAM test. Now if I go to another picture here, all right, and I want to apply the same thing, presto, everything is just like the other one. So it's a really neat way to sort of be able to standardize things. If you find particular groupings of adjustments that work for you, you can create a preset and things just, you know, work a whole lot easier. Now I have presets for a variety of things. For example, I have a preset that works with my Nikon D800 with a macro lens. I have a certain degree of sharpness, and let's see, what did I put on this? I think it had to do more with decreasing the contrast, and also it had to do with the calibration, I believe, and what profile I was using. But now, having said, you know, this is really a neat way to go through this, and in some ways, why did Adobe do this when you can actually just make the adjustments as you want? People got used to the idea of Instagram filters, and this is sort of Adobe's way of doing the same thing. Okay, now presets are not profiles. So let's go back to the idea of what profiles are, and because this is relatively new. Presets have been with Lightroom for generations. I don't know exactly. I think it was actually in Lightroom 1, but if it wasn't 1, it was 2. So it was very early on that you had the idea of preset. But profile is just a relatively recent addition. I think it came in the last major update. Now think of profiles like you would your camera setting, so that when you're, you know, creating, you see on your camera you have vivid, standard, landscape, portrait, black and white. There's all different kinds of profiles, settings like that on your camera. Well, think of that as that's the way Lightroom can cook your raw files, and you don't have to do any further editing. So let's take a look at Lightroom again. Okay, now I'm going to go. So here's a picture, same thing, and I'm going to go up to where the profiles are, and they're a little bit hidden here. You can see here's the panel that's called profile. You can click on this drop down box and you can change from Adobe Color to portrait. Let's go to portrait and see how it changes. Not much. Let's go to vivid. Changes a bit. You can see the colors get a little bit more contrasty. Obviously, when it goes to monochrome, makes a big difference. Okay, now there's let's go back to just the basic thing here. You can have a profile that you specifically design for your camera. Okay, so now I took this with my Olympus, and here is my profile for my Olympus, and let's see if now that is the profile based on using a Macbeth color checker. And so if I wanted to say, well, I'm really looking to get the most neutral of this, and this is a mixed a scene that has mixed a mixed source of light. You've got the sunlight coming in through the stained glass windows, and then you have inside the tungsten bulbs. So it's really a hard thing to get the skin tones correct. So switching to one of my this one, sunlight, that's a little bit warm compared to this one in open shade. I think that looks about the best. So I'm going to set that one. Now, you can also have what they call creative profiles. Let me just close this up for a minute so I can get to the thing. If you look down here, there are what are called the artistic profiles. So for example, this gives you sort of an old filmy kind of look. And they have a whole bunch of these things. Now, is this different than a preset? Well, it is, because it's sort of working on the raw file before you start making any kind of adjustments in Lightroom. There's a whole bunch of black and white ones, from high contrast to soft. There's another set called modern, and you can sort of scroll through these and see which one you like. This is sort of a bleached out, and then there is one that they call vintage, which I guess is supposed to look like old film. You know, I don't use a lot of these, but I think that it's something that you should be looking at to see what your particular picture wants to do. I'm going to go back to my camera profile, because I think that just gives us the best look for this picture. Okay, now, all right, so I'm starting there. Okay, and now I can go back to my and use profiles in addition to it. So there's all sorts of different ways of dealing with this. Okay, so we've gone over the difference between profiles and presets. Let's go back to Keynote and figure out what's our next thing. So the next thing we're going to talk about is making collections. I find making collections to be one of the most useful tools that you have in Lightroom, and mainly because I've got a lot of pictures in Lightroom, and eventually you will also. And reminding yourself where things are is so important. So I like to group pictures together. So, you know, for example, if I'm doing a talk for BAM, I want to put together a collection of the images that I'm going to use. Now, to select a image, you can use any one of you can use the stars, you can use a flag, you can use a color label, but the way I like to do it typically is I like to use what Lightroom calls the quick collection. And because all you have to do is hit the letter B, and that makes a copy of it go into this area called the quick collection. So let's go and see what that looks like. All right, so these were pictures that I took last Thursday at Talmud study. Again, this is for the new website. So I look at that picture there and I say, okay, that looks pretty good, because I want to make a little collection here. So I like that one. I like that one. I like that one. I like that one. Let's see what else. There's another good one. Okay, so I have now picked a bunch of, um, of images. I haven't rated them. I just sort of, say these are pretty good. So now I'm going to look at the quick collection. Now you can look at it by going, it's right on the top of the library over here, but the easier way is just hit Command B. It's B to select into the quick collect, and Command B to show the quick collect. Okay, so now I've got these pictures that I took at Talmud study, these 4 that I've said, okay, these are going to form a new collection, and I'm going to call that Talmud study. So I'm going to make a new collection. Now the simple way to do this, you can go to library and go to new collection, or you can just hit Command N. And I'm going to call this Talmud study. All right. You have various options here. You can include the selected photos, which obviously you want to do. You can make new virtual copies so that if you do something to the images in the collection, they don't necessarily change the ones that are in the library. You can set it as a target collection, and you can sync it with Lightroom CC. I'm not going to do this now, but these are very valuable, and some collections I do that. Okay, so let's create that. All right. Now, if you go down to the end of the column, oops, the end of the column for the library, you'll see the collections. They're all lumped together. All right. Now you can see I have lots of collections, and I group them, but even still, I have a lot of collections. And someday I'm going to go through and get rid of them. Now remember, these are not the original files. These are just the virtual copies. Now again, look at this. Here's Talmud study, and there's the 4. Now I could go back to the original folder, I should say. Here it is. And I say, oh, that's really a good picture. I want to put that in the Talmud study collection. Now, I can do that by dragging this down, finding Talmud study, right-clicking on it, and you'll see you can add that selected photo to this collection. Now, when you look at this, you see the picture of Jeff is there. So collections are really useful. They organize your work. I have a lot of different collections that I'm constantly adding to whenever because I'm doing a lot of compositing now, and so I will, take a picture, and I know I'm going to use part of that picture in a composite photograph. So I have a folder that I call composite elements, or I have a collection called composite elements, and I'll make a virtual copy of the picture and add it so that I'm remembering that that's something that I'm going to use. Okay, so let's go back to our outline. What else? Okay, we've created a new collection. Let's talk about mergers. And this is not financial mergers. These are HDR and panel mergers. In the beginning, Lightroom was pretty terrible at both of this, but they have gotten really a lot better at this, being able to merge images. Basically what you do is you highlight, these are 4 images that I use to take a picture of the stained glass in the Bet Kahila, and I select them, and then I go to, I basically, the easiest way to do it is to right click, and you end up with this menu drop down, this flyout, and you pick photo merge and you merge it HDR, and you get this come up menu come up, and you can, I always hit auto align and auto settings, and I may uh, uh, the deghost is particularly useful when you may have had a little bit of camera movement. I believe this was taken on a tripod, so it really didn't make a difference. And you hit it, and you can see that it does a really good job in creating the HDR. So here's an example of some images that I made walking around in Santa Cruz, and I was thinking of taking a bunch of pictures of this wall with cars painted on it and cars actually in front of it. I wasn't really thinking of a panoramic. I wasn't on a tripod. I wasn't really trying to be level on this whole thing. And so this is really a good test of how good the panoramic function for Lightroom is. Because if you do a panoramic on a tripod, really carefully keeping things level and moving from one shot to the next, you can really do a good job. But I've have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 images. And again, I'm going to right click and go to photo merge, and I'm going to go to panorama. And it's thinking, and you see here you can select a projection. You could do a cylindrical, which doesn't change it much. You can use perspective. Normally spherical works the best. Yeah, perspective always creates this problem. What's interesting about perspective is that it tries to straighten the lines, and you can then use boundary warp to sort of make it work better. And actually, that works pretty good. It comes out looking like a very good wide-angle shot with very little distortion there. You can set to auto crop, you can set auto settings, and one thing that I really like is I like to create a stack, because then I know that I've done the panoramic. So I have on top of the stack I have the merged image, and underneath you have the 6 other images. So I'm going to say, okay, merge this, and it'll take a second to think, and there you can see it's creating the panorama. And notice that all the pictures got pulled into this. Now what's interesting about this is that the preview did not match the what actually came up, and that's kind of interesting. So let's let's go back here and unstack. Okay, and I'm going to get rid of this one because that certainly did not work well. So I'm going to delete this picture. No sense keeping it. Delete it from the disk. I'm going to take the same 6 pictures, and let's do it again. Panorama. And this time I'm going to leave it on spherical. I'm going to do the same thing with the boundary warp, so to get it so that we get rid of all the... Now I can see the boundary warp causing a problem here, so let's take this back down to 0. Okay, and I'm going to fill in these things a different way. So I'm still going to do the create a stack. I'm not going to do... I could do auto crop, and that gets rid of that, but I think that that's not what I want to do. So I'm just going to merge this and create the, the stack again. And here's our stack with you can see that's a much better panorama. So useful to try different things. You don't, all you're using up, if you want to say, is your time and also some disk space. But when I get a panorama or an HDR that doesn't work, I just delete it. Okay. So, what's next? Exporting. Exporting files is really something that everybody should know how to do. And the reason that you should know how to do it is because when you send me pictures for our monthly review, you should know exactly what you should be sending. And now I haven't made specific kinds of requests of you. I just said send me a JPEG, but the reality is we should be having specific type of files, and Lightroom is excellent in doing this. Basically what you do is you select the picture, you either do Command E or you right click or you push the export button in the library module, and then it uses a set of presets, and I'm going to show you how to do that in just a second. Okay, so let's go back to Lightroom. So let's say I wanted to export this. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the develop module and I'm going to crop this. Okay, I like in some ways cropping in Lightroom is good because you can always go back to where you started from. All right, so here we are, and I could right click and go to export, and it brings up the export, or it has all the different user presets that I have created. And let's go to just the export. We can get there also by, if we were in, we could go over here to the export button. All right. So what's nice about this is it asks you a series of questions, and you can select a specific folder. So I have selected my desktop. You can also put it in a specific folder called BAMPG. Okay. Now I can rename the file. Okay. I could have the original file number or a sequence or a date, but I like to use a custom name, and so I'm going to call this BAPMG test export. And you can see here that's exactly what it says. Now, what kind of file settings? Well, I want a JPEG. What kind of quality do I want? Well, quality, the larger the quality, the bigger the file. So I'm going to want a small file because I want to be able to email this. So let's set this down to say 20%. Okay, that's a pretty low quality. Actually, let's go 25%. You can actually just put 25 there. Color space, if I was going to be printing this or sending it off to be printed, I would want to probably do it in Adobe RGB, but sRGB is great for the web. I can change the size. Now, 1920 by 1200 is standard high definition size, but I can go smaller. I could create one based on the dimensions. But let's just do this. Sharpen for screen, but you could also do sharpening for matte or glossy paper. Resolution for screen work, if this is going to just be displayed on the projector, 72 is fine, 100 is fine. Do you want to include the metadata or not? Do you want to put a watermark on? I have a watermark that says Larry Shapiro Photography. So, and then I can hit export. Now, if I like these settings, I can then add this and basically call this BAM test preset. It goes in the user preset, I create it, and it will be there for me the next time. Okay, so let's export this. All right. And here's the folder, BAMPG, and if you look here, you'll see BAM test export, and there it is. So, and it's got my watermark on it, and so there's, you know, it's a nice way to export things. Opened up in the preview, and this was only 271 kilobytes, so that's an easy thing to email. Okay, so we've done exporting. Now, we've actually covered black and white conversion last month, but I'll quickly go through. So let's take this picture here and let's convert it to a black and white. Now, typically what I do when I'm making any kind of major changes, I always make a virtual copy, okay? And the virtual copy, in essence, takes up no extra space on your hard drive. By doing this, you keep the original untouched, and what's even nicer about it is that it becomes the reference for the next one. Okay, so here I am, and I'm going to click on the black and white. All right, now you can see we went from color to black and white, but we really want to increase some of the details here, and what happens is the HSL adjustment panel becomes the B&W panel, and you can now take these sliders and move it and see how you can change. Now look at that sign there where it says Andy's Auto Supply. As I decrease the density of the red, it becomes more contrasty. Let's see what happens. Orange even happens better. Let's talk about yellow. Yeah, I like make the yellow a little lighter. The greens are interesting because it makes a little sign on the parking meter stand out. Let's see what happens with the blues. I like that. Doesn't do much with purple and doesn't do much with magenta. Okay, so we've gone from, let's look at one of the other things that I really like about Lightroom is that the history module is right here. So this is where we are right now, okay? And I can create a snapshot just by clicking on this little plus, and what that does is it creates a state so that even if I went back, okay, and I've changed it, I can always go back to that spot. So you can see the difference. Here was the auto black and white conversion, and here's the one where we've made all the changes. So a very useful thing is create snapshots. All right, so that's black and white conversion. So what else do we want to talk about? Plugins. Okay, let's go to plugins. Now I'm going to go here, back to this picture. I'm going to go to Edit In, and there's our old friend Topaz Studios. Again, you're going to want to do it as edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments, and it brings up Topaz. I'm just going to make a few quick changes in Topaz. I have a little recipe here that I've been using when I just want to. This makes things sharper and more contrasty, but still with a lot more detail. And you'll see how that works. And I can just say, okay, let's save that. Almost as a cartoonish look to it. But I'm good with that. I want to quit Topaz. I want to go back to Lightroom, and you can see that Lightroom has imported that Topaz change. There it was, the original. There's the sort of cartooned version, and here's the plain black and white. Okay. So, bookmaking. All right. Bookmaking is a whole subject in and of itself, but I will go over this briefly. Okay, so let's say we have, I'm going to go back to the library and I'm going to pick a few pictures from the Talmud collection. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down here. Oops. All right. So I've got 6 pictures here. I'm going to select all of them. And then I'm going to go up to the book module. And what happens is that it automatically lays out these pictures within a book. Now, Lightroom is linked to the Blurb book publisher, which I really like. It puts you can move all these things around. You can make it different sizes, and of course different costs. You can see for a hardcover standard landscape with only this few pictures, it's $40. So I don't want to do that. Let's make it a soft covered book. Let's go to standard paper, and we're down to $21. So but there's a lot more to be done for bookmaking, and we'll talk about that sometime in the future.